Now from Washington is Vermont's independent Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, thanks for joining me. It is a sad day for those of us who were hoping that we might be turning a page and looking towards a more equitable society. What do you think it is going to take to convince Republicans like Mike Enzi that this isn't a story about high school lifeguards? This is a story about minimum wage workers who, on average, are between 24 and 34 years old. These are big-time adult jobs that pay very, very little.
Well, Alex, you're absolutely right. The tragic reality is that today in America, you have millions and millions of adults, many of them trying to raise families, who are working 40 hours a week, and they're living in poverty. And that's not what this country should be about. It really does astound me that at a time when our Republican friends in the House are voting to give huge tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires and large corporations, they don't have it in their hearts to give us at least a $10.10 minimum wage, which would take so many people out of poverty. And as you indicated, this is not just teenage kids getting after-school money. These are people trying to raise a family who understand that the minimum wage has not kept up with inflation. Price of food, the price of gas, price of home heating oil has soared in recent years. Minimum wage has not. So to my mind, if we want to address the issue of income inequality in America, where the people on top are doing so well, when so many people are hurting, at the least you've got to raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. I would go further than that, but that is an important step forward.
Senator Sanders, you make a very, very good point about the fundamental fairness at odds here, which is people should be able to live on a wage if they are working full-time, a wage that keeps them out of poverty. I mean, that's sort of the idea behind a minimum wage, right? We are in violation of that as a country at this moment. There is the labor reality, which we just talked about, who has these jobs. And then there's a basic economic argument. This would lift 900,000 people out of poverty, possibly millions more, depending on how you look at the numbers. And beyond that, it would be it would have a stimulative effect on the economy. It seems like Tim Pawlenty, at least, sort of understands that. Do you get the sense inside the halls of Congress that there are Republicans in the GOP who know this is the right thing to do?
Well, I tell you, Alex, I think the Republican Party has become extremely ideological and extremely right-wing. And let me tell you this will shock some of the viewers out there. But I suspect that a majority of Republicans now are not only opposed to raising the minimum wage, they accept the Koch brothers' line that the concept of minimum wage is undemocratic, it is anti-American, it restricts freedom. And they will move us to the day, if they get their way, where in high unemployment areas in America, you can have people working for $3 an hour or $4 an hour. So to answer your question, I'm afraid the Republicans have moved so far to the right that they accept this ideology that any interference by the part of the government, i.e. having a minimum wage, is a terrible thing.
That's deeply distressing, Senator Sanders. The idea that in some corners of the GOP, the concept of the minimum wage they are increasingly thinking is unconstitutional or undemocratic. I mean, what do you think accounts for that? I mean, how did the Republican Party swing that far right, which is further than it ever has been?
It is clearly the Republican Party of today, and people have got to understand this. This is not our parents' or grandparents' Republican Party, which used to be a moderate conservative party of Dwight D. Eisenhower and others. This is now a right-wing extremist party. You ask how that happened, I would argue a number of factors, but one of them really is the Koch brothers and the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that have been spent on campaigns and in other political ways. So that right now, if you want to get support, unlimited financial support for your campaigns, you better tout a right-wing extremist political view. And that includes not only not raising the minimum wage, not only not having pay equity for women, but cutting back on Medicaid, cutting back on education, and giving more tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country. That is their ideology. And it's an ideology that most people don't support. But big money is pumping a lot of funding into those candidates who tout that position.
Yeah, and clearly that financial support is at the sacrifice of the vast majority of American voters. I mean, not only the minimum wage, 73% of the country opposes a raise in the federal minimum wage, but we even have new poll numbers today from NBC and the Wall Street Journal. 55% of respondents believe that the economic and political systems in America are stacked against, quote, people like me. 54% of the country believes that because of the widening gap between incomes of the wealthy and everyone else, America is no longer a country where everyone, regardless of their background, has an opportunity to get ahead and move up to a better standard of living. These are searing indictments.
Alex, I mean, that is the case. I think the perception of most Americans is, in fact, quite right. We are moving toward a situation right now where not only a small number of billionaires have enormous influence over our economy, and I'm talking about Wall Street and some of the large multinational corporations, but increasingly they have, because of Citizens United and their ability to pump unlimited sums of money into campaigns, they now have huge influence over our political process. And that is not what America is supposed to be. It's supposed to be one person, one vote. Not the Koch brothers spending hundreds of millions of dollars to buy politicians. And the end result is that we're seeing a middle class disappearing, more and more people living in poverty, while the people on top are doing phenomenally well. That has got to change if we're going to preserve the America that we love.
Well, I will say, just as a silver lining to this, the state of Hawaii just raised their minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, which is, of course, what Democrats are trying to do in Congress. And perhaps at the state level, they can shame Republicans in Congress into actually doing something on the issue. Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you, as always, for your time.
Thank you.
Just ahead, after his recent comments about the poor and people in, quote,